Most lavish, big-screen theatrical releases have a hefty marketing push behind them, but it's simply impossible for everything to be a commercial success. But what about those films that actually printed money at the box office, yet were almost instantly forgotten? Hell, perhaps you never even heard about them in the first place. That's absolutely true for the following 10 films. So with that being said, I'm Jem from WhatCulture.com, and here are 10 of the highest-grossing movies you've never heard of.
Want to stay safe online and save big? Get up to 76% off a 2-year NordVPN plan, plus 4 months free and up to a $50 Amazon gift card. Just scan the QR code or click the link in the description and it's all yours.
Number 10, Nazar II. Let's kick things off with the most recent film on the list, a movie that, despite having made zero cultural imprint on the West, is currently the 5th highest grossing movie of all time. Nazar II is a Chinese animated fantasy sequel whose predecessor grossed an impressive $742.7 million worldwide back in 2019. And while China's booming cinema market made it likely that Nazar II would perform even better, did anyone anticipate it to gross over $2 billion, blowing past both Avengers Infinity War and Star Wars The Force Awakens in the process? It's all the more impressive given that more of 98% of the film's grosses have been from the Chinese market alone, and yeah, unless you're a keen follower of the global box office, there's a good chance you have never ever heard of it. Again, it speaks to not only the film's quality and status as a pop culture phenomenon, but also China's growing influence in the film industry. All the same, considering that Nazar II is the only non-Hollywood production in the top 50 highest grossing movies of all time, its performance defies any sort of straightforward categorization. Number 9, Oz the Great and Powerful. It's incredibly telling that despite Wicked dominating cinematic discourse late last year, few spared a thought for the previous Oz movie, the 2013 spiritual sequel Oz the Great and Powerful. This inexplicably James Franco starring romp seemed like it came and went in the blink of an eye upon release, and if you happened to be on holiday for a week or two when it hit cinemas, you could easily have spaced on its existence altogether. It's puzzling though, considering that this film grossed $493.3 million, which is just a hair shy of $500 million, far eclipsing the gross of your average blockbuster in the current theatrical environment. Folks love to complain about Avatar having no cultural impact, but Oz the Great and Powerful is truly a film that existed solely to generate some money and then seemingly be instantly forgotten. If you weren't glued to the multiplexes in 2013, you could not be blamed for having no idea that this thing ever got made, let alone released and watched by millions. Number 8, Hi Mum. In the West, it's basically impossible to consider that a family comedy could gross far more than your average superhero movie, but in 2021, Chinese dramedy Hi Mom netted a mind-blowing $841.7 million. For context, it made more money theatrically than the likes of Inception, 2002's Spider-Man, Wonder Woman, Independence Day, and E.T., to name a few. This is all the more impressive given that almost all of its grosses came from China alone, and noteworthy as this happened around the time that Hollywood studio comedies began to seriously struggle theatrically, with most now going direct to streaming. Even accepting that Hi Mom is one of the highest grossing non-English language films ever, and was also the highest grossing film from a solo female director until Barbie came along in 2023, it's not terribly surprising that this isn't much known at all outside of China, bar those with their finger on the pulse of the box office. Number 7, Age Continental Drift. Now, it would of course be ridiculous to suggest that most audiences hadn't heard of the mega hit Ice Age franchise, given that the 5 theatrically released films have grossed an eye-watering $3.21 billion globally combined. It's also fair to say that the series swiftly slid into firmly anonymous territory by the time its 4th entry, Continental Drift, came out. Though the first film is well remembered for debuting the IP in the first place, and the next 2 sequels had somewhat memorable hooks, a giant flood and dinosaurs respectively. After that, it became incredibly easy to lose track. If you asked the average person how many Ice Age movies there were, or moreover, what each was called, probably they wouldn't have a clue. Few could tell you that Continental Drift was the 4th Ice Age, or recently recount anything that happened in it, and yet, it grossed a mind-melting $877 million worldwide. An astonishing performance for a film that jettisons itself from the memory banks even while it was being watched. Number 6, The Untouchables. The Untouchables is precisely the sort of comedy drama film that would probably get sent straight to streaming these days, and though it isn't much talked about anymore, it was an absolute phenomenon for a hot minute in 2011. This French buddy film revolving around the relationship between an aristocrat and his carer grossed well over $400 million worldwide. It was enough of a success to even get its own English language remake starring Bryan Cranston and Kevin Hart. 2017's The Upside, which was also a box office hit, albeit a more modest one at $125.9 million. However, if you weren't closely following the international film circuit 15 years ago, and especially if you aren't French, you couldn't be blamed for having never heard of The Untouchables. This was a bona fide pop culture event in France where The Untouchables made almost 40% of its overall box office gross, in addition to being nominated for a truckload of Caesar Awards. The film didn't muster quite the same level of influence outside of France, failing to secure a Best International Film Oscar nomination as many expected it to, and despite its success, The Untouchables quickly faded out of the international cultural circuit. Number 5. Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba the movie, Mugen Train. Though it would be ridiculous to suggest that anime was in any way niche this day and age, it's still fair to say that few predicted the storming commercial success of Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba the movie, Mugen Train, which is a sequel to the first season of the Demon Slayer TV series. Produced for just $15.7 million, the film grossed a staggering $507.1 million globally. This would be a jaw-dropping figure for a sequel to an anime TV series in any year, but the fact that it happened at the height of the global pandemic in 2020 is truly outstanding. More to the point, the movie ended up the highest grossing film of 2020, easily beating out Hollywood competition like Bad Boys for Life, Tenet, and Sonic the Hedgehog, and marking the first time in history that the annual box office had been topped by a non-Hollywood movie. There's no denying, however, that Demon Slayer's release was a true moment in time for Japanese audiences above all else. The film was fortunate to release during a calm period of the pandemic for Japan, and with little other competition at the cinema, it dominated the box office unchallenged. This unsurprisingly was not replicated in other markets around the world, and so unless you're an anime fan, there's a good chance that this movie passed you by entirely. Number 4. Wonder. In 2025, it's practically unthinkable for a low-budget coming-of-age drama, even one based on a hit novel, to gross more than $300 million globally, but that is precisely what Wonder did back in 2017. The $20 million drama starring Julia Roberts, Owen Wilson, and Jacob Tremblay released to broadly positive reviews from critics, received a rare A+ cinema score from general audiences, and landed an Oscar nomination for Best Makeup and Hairstyling. Despite connecting with so many upon release, though, Wonder came and went in the blink of an eye. And on the other side of the pandemic, an era where modest dramas like this struggled hard, it's largely been forgotten. This is perhaps evidenced no better than by the fact that the recent Wonder spin-off film, White Bird, was a box office flop, despite also receiving an A+ cinema score. It's not unfair to say that Wonder is a more unassuming project than basically every other film on this list, but all the same, it's shocking how little it's discussed today despite being a sizable hit less than a decade ago. Number 3. Rio 2. Rio 2 is one of those sequels you'll squint at and ask yourself, did I watch that? Did I even know they made that? Though the original 2011 animated film was hardly great, it grossed $483.8 million worldwide and was just as memorable enough thanks to spirited vocal performances from Anne Hathaway and Jesse Eisenberg as the central characters. Rio 2 then apparently came out in 2014 to wildly mixed reviews and grossed ever so slightly more than its predecessor, settling at a $498.8 million final cum. That said, try and find someone in your immediate social circle who knows for sure that they've seen Rio 2. Better yet, can they actually recount even a faint scrap of its plot? This is a textbook example of a generic animated sequel that's made to function as a babysitting device, rather than to actually inspire creativity or curiosity in younger viewers. Rio 2 made $500 million, but in terms of real-world pop culture engagement, zilch. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and while you're there, drop us a like, share, and subscribe too. Number 2. The Legend of Tarzan. Remember that mega-budget Tarzan movie that came out less than a decade ago? No? In 2016, Harry Potter director David Yates helmed The Legend of Tarzan, which starred Alexander Skarsgård, Margot Robbie, Samuel L. Jackson, and Christoph Waltz. Despite receiving mostly negative reviews, the $180 million summer tentpole grossed almost double its budget, netting $356.7 million. While that means it still fell about $100 million short of being a surefire box office hit, still a stonking number for a film that more or less fell off the face of the earth within a few weeks of release. This is in part because Yates' picture was so blandly forgettable that it just didn't leave any lasting impression whatsoever. It was a film that a surprising number of people watched in cinemas and yet never thought about again once it was over. The Legend of Tarzan is a big fat nothing burger of a movie, if there ever was one, but if you stumble across it on streaming one night and you see Margot Robbie in the thumbnail, you'll probably wonder how you never heard of it. And number 1, Home. Almost exactly a decade ago, DreamWorks sent Home into cinemas, a lavish $135 million sci-fi comedy animation starring Jim Parsons, Rihanna, Steve Martin, and J-Lo that grossed an impressive $386 million globally. It's especially impressive given that Home basically feels like a fake movie or something you'd get if you asked AI to spit out a mid-2010s CGI animation. Home is very, very real, even though it evaporated from the public consciousness in record time. This perhaps speaks to not only the film's aggressive mediocrity, but also the fact that The Big Bang Theory was such a pop culture phenomenon throughout the 2010s that Jim Parsons' involvement alone likely gave Home a sizable boost. Of course, there's the Rihanna factor too, as she created a concept album for the film. Then again, the fact that Rihanna has not been up to too much musically since then has only given folks even less of a reason to think about her and, by extension, this movie she was in.